Hey everyone, welcome back to the We Talk Politics podcast. No, it's been a while, but hopefully you still remember us. As always, I am your host, Corey Tanisoff, joined by fellow co host, Gerald Mendoza.
All
It
right.
has been a while, and a lot of stuff has happened, but we're pretty much going to be focusing on everything that's happened in the last week. And we've got a full slate of things. So stick with us for the next hour and prepare to be very polarized on some issues.
Yeah, it's definitely been eventful to say the least. I think I was looking back at our last two episode titles. There were "Politics Never Sleeps" and "Politics Never Stops," and they sure have not. Definitely a lot of recent developments, but also just to backtrack a little bit, we really do want to hit some what I consider major talking points about what has gone on since we've last been on the air, which I think was more than a month ago.
And before
What
we get into that, I just want to lay out what we will be talking about today
right?
so that you can just be prepared for what to expect. We will be talking about different governor events happening right now, or that have happened in New York, and that may possibly be happening in California. We will be talking about the rise of the Delta variant of COVID-19 and how the vaccination and the spread of COVID has impacted our schools and other life. We will be talking about the events that have unfolded in the last week in Afghanistan and how every president beforehand has had an impact on where we are today and Joe Biden's response to it and where we go from here.
Yeah. It's been it's definitely been pretty busy those last month and a half or so. So yeah, getting right into it. This definitely is one of the biggest news stories that dropped just recently was the fact that Governor Andrew Cuomo has made his announcement that he has turned in his resignation, effective, I believe he said 14 days to his press conference that he announced it. Um, this after very serious report from the New York attorney's office, I think state's attorney or district, one of the attorney's office related to the state of New York, filed a report and basically came out and said that uh, Governor Cuomo had conducted himself inappropriately, um, sexually harassing and sexually assaulting multiple female staffers in different capacities, using his power to gain leverage on the attitudes and the possible repercussions of this situation. Some victims include former secretaries, former office workers, former state troopers, and things of that nature. Many details have been released. One of the um, victims of Governor Cuomo's actions came out, I think, a couple days after his resignation to detail some of the things that she was subjected to. And I think CBS has that uh, interview recorded and in their archives if you want to take a look at that. But nonetheless, all of this coming to a head where he decided that it would be best for him not to be the governor of New York. This also coming after his announcement, coming one day after the state assembly made a decision to begin preliminary hearings on the impeachment, starting an impeachment process or an impeachment case against the governor of New York. That has since been dropped, I believe. Um,
The district attorney's office had initially stated that they were going to drop the investigation, but have since said that they will be continuing the investigation even after he resigns.
yeah. So the DA is going to continue that. The impeachment proceedings are not going to continue in the state house. The transferring now goes to attorney, or not attorney general. I'm sorry, the
The DA.
lieutenant governor
Oh,
of New York. Her name escapes me, but she is the first female governor in the state of New York. She has made scathing remarks about Governor Cuomo's actions. Says her office will be run very differently, in a more safe manner, in a more understanding manner, and I'm interested to see where this goes. Um, but yeah, the governor of New York is Andrew Cuomo, who many people were endeared to during the pandemic with his dealings about how he managed his state's situations with COVID numbers and the city of New York with its outbreaks at different points, many people looking to him because he had gone basically head to head with President Trump as well on multiple situations, on different matters. And he became a popular person, so much so that some people were calling for him to be the nominee during the 2020 presidential race, over whoever else was left in the field, which I think was only a few people like President Biden and Senator Sanders at the very end. How things change, information came out, and this is definitely, something that had someone told me a year ago. I'd not necessarily say I wouldn't have believed you because we had already seen the world come to a complete stop at that point. However, it definitely, is something that I was not, as we put on social media a lot in a semi-joking manner, and it was not on my yearly crazy event bingo card, if you will.
And Cuomo had a rather really weird quote coming from him after the allegations had been made public, in which he said, "I'm not a pervert, I'm just Italian," which PJ is shaking in his boots right now.
Yeah, it's really bad. His press conference was, listen, the resignation itself and the decision to take to resign and to step down and to everything, fine. I'm
Pretty
not
mundane.
necessarily straightforward,
Yep.
as it should be. It's just the press conference that was there was very much, I really think I'm innocent, but y'all don't think so, so I'm just going to roll with this and say goodbye because y'all are telling me. It was very much a lot of deflection, a lot of trying to. Honestly, it was trying to mansplain his way out of his circumstance.
Seemed a little self-congratulatory at times, even.
Yeah, and it just didn't. It was not well rounded. So he probably came up with that. Maybe his advisors helped him with that. And speaking of his advisors, CNN's Chris Cuomo, his brother, one of the major anchors for the late night time slots on CNN, who also became more popular during lockdown and pandemic situations, simply because everyone was at home and trying to see what was going on. He was apparently advising his brother through this situation, trying to keep noise about it down, trying to give him some type of pointers on how to minimize, PR on this whole situation. The problem with that is he was still working as a news anchor for CNN while he was doing that. He is on vacation right now, conveniently. However, before this whole situation really got out of hand for Governor Cuomo, CNN did approach Chris Cuomo and said, "Hey, we understand that your brother is in this situation, and that should you decide to try to want to advise him, because not only are you literally a news anchor and would be a good PR or press secretary for this situation right now, his family and everything. If you want to advise him, if you want to work with him right now, we're not against it. We're just going to put you under a leave of absence so that there's no conflict of interest." Chris Cuomo said no, and now we're in a situation where even though he had said no to the leave of absence, he continued to try to advise his brother while also being a reporter for the situation, which just puts a lot of...
It puts the credibility of their reporting under question.
Especially his. And it unfortunately, it mars... I'm not saying nobody else at CNN knew it, but I'm definitely almost positive that many of the people didn't know. Like, he kept it as hush-hush as possible. So I'm not gonna say he probably he's not over there having at the water cooler with Don Lemon and Aaron Burnett saying, "Yeah, I told him to say
Wolf
this, that, and
Blitzer.
the other."
My man.
He's but it's brought upon now the more fragile reputation that any news site has into question, especially CNN. And it's just a very bad, complicated situation for him as well. I told my dad I might have been a bit jumpy about it, but I told my dad I would not be surprised if they release him, if they relieve him of his contract, if they say, hey, like, I'm sorry, we gave you an option that would have worked,
Yep.
and you didn't do it and went behind our backs, and it was a huge conflict of interest, so
And
we can't bring you back.
as you said,
What
it really it illustrates CNN in a bad light because it brings the number one thing that you need to be in news, if anything, is credible. And when you have your premier, like late night host, late night talking guy,
right.
is so close to something like this, it brings into question the credibility because he's not. You have to think that he wouldn't necessarily. I'm not going to 100% call into question his credibility, but he wouldn't report on it as accurately as somebody who is not connected by blood to the situation may. So
And
this, in turn, you don't get the full scope of events from Andrew Cuomo or from
right,
Chris Cuomo.
yeah, and even if he did, even if he was reporting completely accurately, completely true information without holding anything back, doing his job to the fullest, unfortunately for a viewer, it now just it puts everything into question in an uncomfortable manner.
Yep.
So even if he's telling the truth, there's always going to be something in the back of the mind that says, "But what if he wasn't?" So
I agree 100%.
It just messed with everything, and he should have just taken the leave of absence. People would have understood, but I am waiting to see what the results of this are on Chris Cuomo's career now, because even he's a very capable reporter and anchor and everything. But not only if he gets fired from CNN, it's not just going to be he can't work at CNN.
No, it's pretty much a blackball.
I don't believe anyone's going to pick him up, whether it be MSNBC, Fox, ABC.
That's a funny thought.
I mean, I'm just spitballing here, but you know what I meant. Like, it's just he's been blacklisted. It's basically
Right.
If he gets fired, he's blacklisted. But if they keep him on, he's a liability. So
I mean, we saw it happen to Brian Williams.
Yeah, it happened to Brian Williams with accuracy and reporting and his, and all of that stuff. But also, if you remember correctly, this is way back too. This is almost the same thing that happened with Dan Rather.
Mm-hmm.
Dan Rather, and even though it was more of a staffers and reviewing mistake that happened, CBS said no, we can't.
Yep, it's not good for the brand.
It's not good for the brand, and you've compromised a lot of what we're able to do with you, so we can't use you. So yeah, that's the situation in New York. That's the situation with the Cuomo brothers right now. Further charges possibly coming down the line for former Governor Cuomo. Possible career change for Chris Cuomo. It's
definite career change for Andrew Cuomo.
Definite career change for him. So we'll be watching that intently. I also want to mention in the state of California, it looks as though there was always the potential for a recall election. I am not entirely sure how the election laws work in the state of California. I'm not going to lie to you and say that I do in any way, shape, or form to a reasonable capacity. But what I know is that I think it's almost like a vote of confidence. If I'm being honest, it's like like in different parliaments, different government groups, you can take a vote of confidence, and if you lose, you're out, and they have to reset. This seems to be the case, and the first question that people are being polled for, that people are gonna be asked, is, shall Newsom be recalled? Or will he be put into question? Will his career now be like, will he be put under a microscope and be asked to be removed because he's not been doing a good job in the state? And based on polls right now, it looks like it's 48% yes, 47.5% no, which we know with polls, it means it's virtually a tie. So it looks like the recall is going to happen. And question 2 would be, which candidate should replace Newsom? Should he be asked to be recalled and removed? We have some interesting candidates. Larry Elder is someone who's there. Kevin Paffrath, John Cox, Kevin Falconer, and tied for 5th is Kevin Kiley and Caitlyn Jenner.
I just need to see LeBron James get a vote.
I'm almost positive he will. But they're saying that Newsom has the ability to avoid being recalled and removed if voters in California weren't so apathetic.
Okay. I
Voters
thought
in
you were going to say
California.
he could just say, no, I don't want to be removed, and then that would be it.
No, voters in California, and we've seen this from Democratic voters before, more than Republican voters. I think you'll agree. There is a voter apathy that sets in a lot,
I would
thinking
agree.
that, just like, even though it's in my better interest to vote for this person, I'm not going to vote for them because I'm angry at them, or even that they're just
Well,
not paying enough attention to the political system around them, that they will just miss the vote entirely because
we
it
saw
doesn't seem that important to them.
we saw it in 2016 with Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. Was
Right.
a large amount of Democrats voted instead for Bernie Sanders, even though he had conceded the primary to Hillary Clinton, and a lot of other voters just decided not to vote in general, which handed the way to our 45th president, Donald Trump.
Right, exactly. So, voter apathy, definitely something I think it's really hard to combat, especially within a party that is so polarized within itself right now between progressives and
The
more
old
traditional
guard. Yep.
old guard moderates, and it's just, you know, uh, it's definitely a complicated matter. But if there is a new governor in California, it looks like Larry Elder would be the one who is leading the polls right now, and interested to see where that goes.
Well, in any case, we will be following this very closely, and if anything
Definitely.
comes up, then we will mention it in another podcast.
Right.
I think that it's a very interesting situation because Governor Newsom has been under the microscope for a large portion of this pandemic, mainly based on how he has imposed mandates and gone above municipalities and just across the board issued orders, which some people see as an overstep, similar to what governors Abbott and DeSantis are saying in Florida and in Texas,
Right.
irrespectively. They're saying that the federal government is overstepping and this is not their place to do it. Similarly, those same problems are being seen in California on a state level.
Right. And again, we live under multiple levels of government, but those levels of government do check and balance each other out. It's definitely better to have it that way than to have just one singular entity running every single detail. It makes for the ability to diversify the rules and the laws that we live under. And and everybody's like, why can't we just make it all uniform? Trust me, this country is too diverse for it to be run under a single entity government. Levels of government work because they balance each other out to make things better. Just because something is good for farmers in Kansas doesn't mean it's good for fishermen in Alaska. That's, we have to take that into account. So California being as big as it is and as populated as it is.
It's nearly as diverse as the United States, just in one state itself.
Exactly. And so many different cultures, ethnicities, and political mindsets, if we're being honest. You have to remember, as big as California is and as blue as it is in its urbanized and city areas, there are still many Republican strongholds in different areas of California that are under the direction of the governor. So they have to have their voices heard as well. That it's just the way it works. And so, do I think Governor Newsom overstepped his bounds? I think he did. I think in different points he went too far into one thing and another thing, with these mandates, with restrictions, with closures and lockdowns and things of that nature. without taking into consideration the needs of specific areas. Um, Double-edged sword, because if you let the municipalities decide everything for you, then there's gonna be a disconnect between neighboring municipalities at some point, and there's then the disagreement becomes a PR disaster.
Correct.
Um, I will say, um, with the governorship, now I know this from personal, um, personal accounts from people that I know with connections to different areas of California. Uh, there were, and I know a lot of this because of the arguments that churches had and everything, and I'm well versed in that, but I am so jaded by you know Christians thinking that anything against doing what they tell themselves to do is persecution. It's not. It's just let me get this out of the way. I do consider myself a Christian, but I am not someone who believes that just because the government tells me to stop doing something in my church, it is automatically them telling me that my faith is wrong or any. Just listen. The government has a job to protect the people of its state. And if you're doing something that is not intuitive to that, especially right now during a pandemic, then you have to take a step back. However, the other side of that coin is when Governor Newsom made a restriction that they said that people couldn't sing within religious establishments. Um, I get it. I do. I understand the logic and the science behind it, but also at that point, it is very much as safe as much safer as it would have been to tell churches, "Hey, stop singing." It's gonna cause more problems with spreaders and droplets and all that. It is that is a violation of the First Amendment because you are putting a government imposition on the practice of a specific part of a religion.
Well, and
And
not even to be, you know, so specific, but it has been shown that music is covered under the First Amendment just as a speech form itself.
right, exactly. So there wasn't. That's where the overreach is, and it's not the only overreach that Governor Newsom has done. So the people are jaded, and I'm interested to see where this election goes because California is changing a lot more than I think a lot of people are giving it credit for. Um, there, it's always been like it's Democratic, and they're always going to love their Democrats and everything. I don't I don't think Democrats love their leadership as much as they used to. They're happy with the fact that it's not a Republican, but as soon as that fact is done, um, it is very much a much more critical observance from people who consider themselves Democrats, because there's such a diversity and laundry list with different groups of Democrats that exist between the progressives and moderates and everyone in between. And if you're not doing this, then either you're not a real Democrat, you're just an extremist, or you're not being progressive and keeping up with the times. You're just an old timer who wants to keep the old guard. It causes a lot of problems, and you have to deal with that along with everyone else who doesn't want you voted in the first place. Um, I'm not gonna say the governor was put in an impossible position to deal with, but he definitely didn't do himself any favors when he was faced with certain actions. Um, but we see the same thing on the other side of the coin with you mentioned the Governor Abbott from Texas, Governor DeSantis from Florida, both of whom are potential candidates for this next presidential cycle. Um, and both of whom seem to be doing a really good job of trying to put themselves in a worse position to start off with. Because they're also the ones who you mentioned said the federal government has its limits, pointing out that the limits of the government cannot force them to do certain things within their state, which is true, but they are also imposing rules that violate the rights of the leadership of the municipalities that are under them, including, as Governor DeSantis had stated, withholding certain salaries from state officials should they decide to impose a mask mandate when he said in the state he's banning mask mandates. It's not a good look. It
Well,
is
it's
not a good look, and it's hurting them politically, and it's also just it's throwing the state into a worse off position than it was if they would have followed a model of understanding the levels of government that's in front of them.
well, it's in all for all intents and purposes, that is as close to extortion as you can get.
Right.
And not even just political extortion of, oh, you have to do this or else I won't pass this. It's you can't make this policy decision or else you will not be able to feed your family, which is, I don't think that would hold up in any kind of court challenge if that were
Right.
to be, if a municipality, a county official decided we're going to impose a mask mandate on all of our county buildings, and DeSantis said, oh, well, then you're not going to get your salary. If that got even put at a circuit court or a district court, then I don't see a single way that they rule in favor of the governor, which is
I don't.
really, it does highlight the, irony, as you said, of picking and choosing of, oh, I don't want the federal government can't tell me what to do. I get to run my own people. I get to, I was put here by the people of my state. I get to control the things around here. And then tell the people who were elected by the people of their own county that they can't make decisions for their people.
Right.
It's a very opposite side of the coin for what Newsom has going on in California, where he's just across the board saying, oh, well, I'm going to be open and honest. I am putting on these mandates, and you guys will either have to deal with it or vote me out.
I mean, yeah, and again, every
At
single
least he's
state
not
is different.
Italian.
Goodness. I mean, I would say, Governor DeSantis is definitely trying to tap into, we'll call them the much more energetic demographic of Republicans who would be willing to vote for him if he says things like this, like no masks across the board whatsoever. The same way that President Trump did when he was in office, feeding into his base.
You got to know your base, and you got to work
and
for those votes. And governors don't have term limits. Well, sorry, some states do have term limits on their governor, and Florida is one of those states. But
some of them have staggered term limits as well, like we see in Virginia,
and in Russia,
and apparently, yeah.
But we have this, and it's not even so much just his own, but it's working for the party. Because if you keep these mandates in, we're not, no masks, none of it. You're not going to have to deal with any of it. And then if that drives his base, then even if he isn't up for re-election, they will put their votes towards somebody who he endorses.
Right.
Which will keep the party in power in Florida.
Yeah. Florida, again, the perennial swing state. That's never going to change just because of how Florida is made up in its population centers, in its the way its population is distributed. The political reality in Florida is always cut down the middle. It can go either way because it can. I did want to mention that along with other Florida politicians, I will say, and I forgot to tell you this earlier, as much as I understand the need for Governor Cuomo to resign or to be taken out of office, to that same effect, I need Matt Gaetz to be held to the same standard. And he is currently under investigation for, I would say, pretty serious allegations of things that were found through...
Matt Gaetz is the U.S. congressman from Florida.
Yeah. I forget which district, but he is from Florida.
Very first congressional district.
Very outspoken, heavily involved with I'll call it the Trump sector of the government and the base. Does a lot of events with Marjorie Taylor Greene and different Trump loyalists. He had been found out, apparently, again, allegedly. I will say allegedly before everything because nothing is official. Allegedly, his Venmo, which we all know is public, you can see anyone's Venmo activity at any time because that's the way the app works. His activity had shown that he had paid for a friend to give money to underage uh, uh, girls for what can be deduced as some illicit and illegal sexual favors. Um, Again, currently under investigation. The FBI seems to be keeping this very tight-lipped and locked tight, not releasing any extra information about it. But I don't see Matt Gaetz finishing another term. No, he might get lucky and try to make it to um, his next end of the term in 2022. But should any more significant information come out about it, I don't see him getting reelected or coming back to office after 2022.
I agree. It's a tough position to be put in, and I think that in situations like this, you reap what you sow. If the allegations, because we don't know the full story of everything yet, it's still unfolding.
Right.
As more stuff comes to light, then we'll have more understanding on it, as is regular and expected. But when things like this happen, they need to be taken really, really seriously, especially because this is a very, very serious crime. If something were to, eventually surface, that could result in being charged.
Right.
But it whether or not it comes out as correct or just has because there's always an inkling of truth for every single allegation. There's an inkling of truth to it, and especially of this magnitude, it will impact his chances for re-election 100%.
Oh yeah.
And I don't believe that he is up for re-election until 4 years until 2024, because he assumed office in 2017. So that means he was re-elected.
He's a representative. He's
not
a senator. He's a representative. Right. So yeah,
so it's every 4 years. Yeah. So 2023. So he's up.
No, he's up every 2 years.
Every 2 years. Okay, my fault.
Yeah.
So yes, he will see the results of this next year.
Yeah.
If he doesn't get ousted beforehand by incriminating findings being found.
Yeah. Which is a definite possibility. But
very, very high probability.
Yeah. So, but moving on from that, we want to touch on, I think, the news of the hour, if we're being honest with ourselves. Definitely the unfolding of the situation and basically dissolution of the Afghan government.
Did we want to touch up on the Delta before we get into this?
Oh yeah, before we get into the Afghanistan news, Delta variant does seem to be making a lot bigger effect on this country than many had anticipated. We looked like we were in a good position earlier in the summer. I would say between June and July, it looked like it was getting much better with our situation in this in this country with the COVID-19. But again, different variant has a lot of different effects. The case numbers are going up again because as we were getting better in terms of public safety, mask mandates started going out because we reached certain thresholds. Like in the state of Maryland, the threshold was 70% vaccination rate for adults, and the mask mandates did start coming down. But with this new Delta variant that seems to be spreading faster, but does not seem to have as intense symptoms, doesn't mean it's not going to do some damage. But a lot more spreadable, seems to be rising number of cases again. And it's definitely causing a lot of stepping back in terms of health officials, government officials. Um, the biggest and probably most affected system we are seeing right now is the school system, which was very, very eager to get back to in school classes after a year of not being in school. Um, it was I was still in school the last when everything started shutting down. You and me were in school. I think
Right.
you were taking some classes at HGC. I was technically full time, and we had an announcement saying after the day after sports shut down. I think it was. No, it wasn't. It was a couple days before. It was a few days before. Um, the weekend before sports shut down, and the announcement was made that this was a global pandemic, and uh, our Howard Community College had announced that they were going to be shutting down for 2 days to sanitize everything and come up with a game plan to try to figure out what was the best option in course of action going forward for the school. And they were taking 2 days out of the school calendar to do that, to reset ourselves for the next coming week, and we never got back in. Same thing happened with public schools. That following, uh, the following Thursday, I went over to your house that day. I was on my way to your house that day
Yep.
when
To start the podcast.
we were starting this project to start the podcast, and I still have that file saved somewhere. I gotta post it, but um, I was in the car. I was listening to the news because just developments, and then Governor Hogan comes on, does a press conference, and announces that all schools are gonna be closed until the end of the month for 15 days for mitigation of a curve. Flattening the curve was the phrase of the day. Flattening the curve and try to minimize the amount of contact between children and anybody, really. That's when really lockdown started for all of us. Schools have not been back in session since then. This includes many altered graduation plans for 2 graduating classes. This includes altered plans for every single curriculum involved. I did not go back to school that following fall semester because my major is in music, and I'm a firm believer that it really wouldn't work unless I'm in person, so I took a leave of absence from school. Other people did all online classes. Schools around August and September of last year had made a decision that they were going to try to open. PJ can attest to this. He signed up for room and board and different things and school like payment bonuses that had to be paid in. And the moment that
Everybody,
happened,
after the deadline hit, then they announced that they were closing everything back down.
exactly, and it was that was a farce, and quite frankly, borderline fraud against these students and their loans and their families. So some accountability needs to be put there, but was always an eagerness to bring students back to the classroom as soon as possible and as safely as possible. That being said, there wasn't a full force re-entry until what was decided that this school year was going to be the year that we were going to get back in. And because things looked so good during the summer, it seemed as though it was a well enough plan that was going to work. Enter Delta variant. Cases are upticking. And also remember, the vaccines that we have still not approved for those 11 and under. So they are not vaccinated. And what we're seeing now is this surge, frankly, this surge in cases amongst young students, amongst students and teachers, because certain states decided to try to bring back full force, but have not been able to mitigate any spreading because of proximity, because of different safety measures that have not been implemented correctly. Overall, the bulk of these new Delta variant cases are children, are minors, people in public school, because there was a rush to get back in. So now school systems already are facing a hard decision. Do we go back in? Do we continue to try to give these children an option to learn? Because many schools, what they did to try to force everybody back in was not give the hybrid option that they were offering, not give the online option that they were offering. So, with all that in place, it did put parents in a very difficult decision. Do I send my kid back to school even though I don't think it's safe and hope for the best, or do I not send my kid in and try to find a different medium? I will say this: I know homeschooling has gone up dramatically, like official homeschooling curriculum admissions and all that have gone up substantially because most parents, God bless them, because they figured out a way that they were able to teach their kids at home without having to send them to school, and that's a safer option for them. And that's the route they went. Other parents do not have the capacity to do that. Had this happened when I was at home, um, when I was in elementary school and middle school, that would not have been an option for my parents. Um, so it's I see a lot of anger from parents saying, you know, they brought our kids back in just to send them back home, and half of them got sick, and unfortunately, that does seem to be the case. Um, I don't know anything other than trying to shut down again for some of these school systems. If there's any other option than that, and bringing back the hybrid classroom, I think it's just too risky. The state of Maryland, I don't believe, has started public school entry levels yet. I don't believe the state of Virginia has either. So they still have a couple weeks to figure out what's working best for this region. But uh, the biggest thing is that these kids who did not have the ability to get vaccinated are the ones that seem to be getting hit hardest right now.
And while we're on the topic, I have said this every time that it comes up. Little disclaimer here is whether or not you want to make the decision to get vaccinated or not, it's totally your prerogative. But whatever you do, be responsible. If you do choose to get the vaccine, I'm fully vaccinated. If you feel the need to that or want to, or however it is, you can go get it. It's free offered online. You just go to your state's you go to your just state's government page, and they'll have access links on there, or the State Department of Health, and they will give a portal for that. If you decide not to be fully vaccinated, or you just don't want to get the vaccine at all because you have your own qualms or whatever about it, then be responsible. Try to avoid large gatherings, and if you are put in a place where you're inside, wear your mask, do all the responsible things. I'm looking at a statistic from San Diego from the 12th of July until August 10th. They had 534 hospitalizations due to COVID-19. 13 of those came from those who were fully vaccinated, and 521 of those were not fully vaccinated. So you run the risk significantly of getting seriously ill if you are not fully vaccinated. And, just be responsible, do your best to be safe. I'm not going to tell you one way or another what to do because that's a personal decision. But however you do it, be responsible, be safe, be smart, just do whatever you got to do. I do think it is interesting, Gerald, that you're pointing out about schools. And as you said, is those 11 and under aren't eligible for it as of right now. These are still emergency authorizations. They're not FDA approved. So, that gives a little, people are leery about it. And in those younger than 11 or 11 or younger, those are I remember when I was in kindergarten, when I was in elementary school, dude, kids, they're dirty creatures. Like you spit on your hand and slap somebody in the head or something like that. Like that's instant. Like if one of you guys has it, now you all have it by the end of the day.
Right.
It was a county in Florida. It might have been Broward County reported 4 adults passed away in 1 week from COVID-19 complications, and 3 of them were not vaccinated and 1 was. And these were all school staffing members. So,
Right.
it does seem a little rushed if they do put in mandates or online school. This will be the third consecutive school year that is affected by the pandemic. So I think that states and school systems are more inclined to try to get things back to normal because these are your formative years for a lot of, those in elementary and middle school. And especially you've got kids who, they just started kindergarten in 2009 or 2020, and then they're going to be going into second grade now, and they have not been able to have a full year with their classmates in person. So that could create some issues. You have, kids who were in 11th grade, 12th grade, or 11th grade or 10th grade in 2020, the beginning of 2020. And, some of them weren't able to walk at their graduation this year. Some of them, and there's still the question of, will you be able to this year? Will things make enough of an upturn in order for by next May, everything's going to be good? And it's really a half of what is smart and logical versus what is going to allow people to get things done. Because I did a semester of the schooling all online, and I may have learned 4 things. So it's not healthy for kids to learn that way. It's not natural for people to learn that way, especially when it's such core concepts that you need, such as reading comprehension, mathematics, the basics of science and history, like all these things.
If we're being honest, especially for these younger kids,
and the socialization is the most important thing at that age.
Absolutely, and I'm gonna also put this out there: we underestimate the importance of they're just younger. They'll put shapes and colors and everything together. Now, listen, kindergartners are not going to get the phonics they need.
Yep.
To be able to even read if we're not doing this properly, and it's difficult. I have a little cousin who is in second grade this year, and her entire second grade has been on the computer. And again, God bless these teachers who are doing every single thing that they can to make this the best possible option for their students. But everyone knows the best possible option for these students is to be back in class. But if they're not safe, then we're in this predicament,
I agree 100%. And, it'll be interesting to see how things unfold as we get closer to the start of the school year and see how, if vaccination numbers go up, because at a while they were at a slow crawl, getting a little higher after it hit the 50% mark, because those who wanted it had already gotten it. And now it's a matter of just people who have time to get it or people who want to get it. And so it'll be very interesting to follow to see how the school systems react. And when everything rolls out in Maryland and Virginia, how the numbers are impacted. Because with adults, we are expected to, if you get sick, that you can isolate. Like your work will give you time off paid to just get healthy. But if you're a kid and you get it, your immune system is not bolstered that much. So it's going to take a lot more out of you. And you're going to not, I'm sure at school they'll forgive homework assignments and stuff, but you're going to be missing a lot of education and knowledge at that point if it is all.
Here's the thing. We also have to remember this previous year, at least in the state of Maryland and many counties and everything, tests, I know in Montgomery County, tests were waived the whole year. There was no testing. There was no state assessments like Park or MSAs that we used to have, high school assessments. It is already shown that there is a big detriment. It has already taken effect in these students' lives a lot, and shown it unfortunately set them back. And the biggest kicker about this is that it could not have been avoided. If we wanted to keep these kids alive, they had to be home, and we had to teach through screens. But we need to recognize that it has been a detriment. So I understand the apprehension to get these kids back into school so that we can do more rigorous work and we can work one-on-one, face-to-face with them in a classroom that works. But again, it needs to be the safest option. And right now, the safest option is, in some places, it's not being inside.
I agree with you on that one. And with that, we will move on to our final meat and potatoes of this episode.
Oh yeah. Um,
This last week, events that have taken 20 years in the making have finally culminated. And as President Biden has pulled a multitude of troops out of Afghanistan
and
and
officials.
officials out of the formerly United States Army and Marine Corps controlled areas, as we moved out, the Taliban has moved in and has actually overtaken the capital of Afghanistan and is moving rampantly through the country. They've taken over the embassies in Afghanistan, and we had already dropped back from it, and it went mostly unopposed, as the Afghan military forces that we had spent $80 billion to train by 2012 only had laid down their arms instead of combating this threat. That's the very bare bones of it. Gerald, I'll let you put your thoughts and then any supplemental information on it.
Well, yeah. Let's go to the beginning of this whole situation. This
9/11.
country, 9/11 happened. One of the most, we will always call it one of the most important and significant events in the history of this nation, in world history. And it's not just because we're being sentimental with it. There's so many things that happened that were caused, that were started, that were gained momentum, that were proven true because of 9/11, that were given the green light because of 9/11. Lasting impacts that still exist today. Some of your favorites being the Patriot Act and the Department of Homeland Security.
My favorite.
Yeah. Your favorites to shit on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I will go to my grave shitting on the United States for that.
That's fair. But that event pushed us into a position where a lot of reasonability went out the window. And again, also, we're speaking about what happened in the past because we know now. But
You know who knew then?
one of your political heroes, I would say.
Ron Paul. He was right.
Ron,
Everybody
Ron
dismissed
Paul.
him.
Ron Paul was right. He was correct. He knew what he was doing.
Finally.
And I've never denied the fact that it was true, but it's been delayed up to this point. This has been a 20-year process of, as I put it earlier, I would say this was always going to be a lose-lose almost from the beginning. We entered Afghanistan because we knew that the Taliban was working with Al-Qaeda, giving them safety, and that Osama bin Laden, the perpetrator and planner and the leader of that
Allegedly.
terrorist organization. I'm just reading the reports here. Don't worry. That Osama bin Laden, the biggest target we had that we were looking for was in Afghanistan, being held by the Taliban-led government of that nation. So we entered Afghanistan in 2001 because the country was shocked and because something needed to be done by the government and rash decisions were made. In that, by around November, December of 2001, after we had been there only a couple months, maybe not even a full 2 months, Osama bin Laden had fled the nation of Afghanistan and entered into Pakistan. While we were there in Afghanistan, though, this was the moment where I say what was the loss. This is where this nation failed. This is where the screw up happened. And it is the fact that after Osama bin Laden was already known to have not been in Afghanistan anymore, he had been driven into Pakistan, the United States decided to stay there because they wanted to depose the Taliban from its leadership position in that nation. And how do we put it? Nation build a democracy into place, which has always shown itself to be so successful when the U.S. is involved. That's the moment for me when this became a failed mission. Not a failed mission, a failure of leadership. We could have left that country alone. We could have left them to their own devices, but the U.S. wanted to get involved. And they got involved, and they opened Pandora's box. So now the U.S. is stuck in this situation in 2001 saying, okay, now that we are going to work to try to depose this terrorist harboring organization and leadership, we're going to have to put our own people in. We're going to have to monitor the situation. We're going to have people be there. We're going to have to manage this whole nation from a military perspective because there is no other leadership in place once we take out the leadership that we don't like. The results have shown themselves to be very disappointing. There were different opportunities for this nation to pull out before this previous week. We had an opportunity around 2008 when George W. Bush was on his way out of office to pull troops out of the nation because it didn't seem to be bearing any meaningful fruit for us and it was becoming expensive. But that wasn't done because I think Governor McCain at the time, Senator McCain of Arizona, who was the Republican nominee, decided that he was going to steer the party towards maintaining a force there for the maintenance of the nation. President Obama, then Senator Obama, ran on the ticket of trying to take the troops out. So George Bush did not get the opportunity to pull out troops, or chose not to. When President Obama was in for 2 terms, even though it was one of his biggest campaign promises to bring the troops home, he did not, because it would very easily destabilize the area and the nation, as had happened with the Arab Spring in 2011, which I think only solidified President Obama's position to maintain and actually increase troop presence in Afghanistan, as to not let that happen in the nation. He could have at one point said we're pulling out, but then didn't. And then President Trump, in his term of office, in his last year of his term in office, made a decision to deal directly with the Taliban and try to give a power brokerage situation and try to spread the power between the Taliban and its people to try to make a transition possible. A lot of people raise their eyebrows at that because, to be fair, once you start negotiating with that leadership, then you give it legitimacy, and that was something that the U.S. had tried to avoid this entire time. But the decision was made to drop those plans, and negotiations were made. We know now, as of recent information that also came out this week, that during those negotiations, Russian presence was there during the negotiations to help walk them along. So very, very, very complicated situation with that. But the decision was made by President Trump to pull the troops out, even though we knew that it would destabilize the situation. But it was time to pull them out. And now that President Biden was in office, he decided to go through with the plan to pull the troops out of Afghanistan and to get the U.S. officials and U.S. involvement in that nation to finish. And the results, unfortunately, have shown that, against our best wishes and desires, the Afghan leadership reverted back to their preference for their perceived safety under Taliban rule, instead of having to fight basically what I would consider a civil war between its government and its Taliban strongholds. And like you had mentioned, the soldiers that the U.S. had trained up to that point with, the Afghan soldiers that spent billions of dollars training, did decide to lay down their arms because reports were showing that local municipality leaders and state leaders were cutting deals with the Taliban before the army had a chance to fight. And without the backup of the United States, it no longer made viable sense for their personal lives to be put in danger for the sake of a country that was basically giving up on them. So they decided to surrender and lay down their arms and allow the Taliban to enter into the capital enter into their presidential palace. Uh, the Taliban has taken over Afghanistan once again. Um, they seem to be more organized this time. We don't know exactly if their policies on certain things, in terms of religion, in terms of segregation between men and women, in terms of different rights afforded to people, will be changed or not. That is yet to be seen. But the reality of the matter is that the U.S. made its decision. As President Biden put, he said, "I am standing by this decision. We are taking these troops out of here." And paraphrasing a little bit, he said, "It's unfortunate to see the way things have happened, but if we think back, honestly, like I said, we lost this war in 2001. It was always going to be a difficult situation to deal with because we got involved where we shouldn't have been getting involved. Um, we lost trillions of dollars in this war. There is no meaningful difference that has been made, I don't think, within this nation from our involvement to the various and numerable troops that fought hard. I hear a lot of people saying it, and I think it is important to state this. This is not the fault and not the problem of the troops who fought hard for our country in Afghanistan all those years. This is not your failure. This is not their burden. And as much as they would like to say, as I've seen others say, go back and try to fix things again, unfortunately, we can't do that. We have spent trillions of dollars, and more importantly, tens of thousands of lives trying to make a difference in a country where we were never going to get a stronghold. And it was time for it to end. Yes, it is hard to watch people trying to cling on to a plane as it's leaving, just as people clung on to the helicopters in Saigon as the U.S. was leaving that area as well in that time period. But the decision had to be made. The things had to be cut off. This had to end at some point. And this is the end that exists. It's not pleasant. It's not preferable. It's not the one we wanted. But it's the one that exists and the one we have to live with. And as hard of a pill that is to swallow, we had no other choice. We could not continue to spend that much money and that much manpower and lives and resources on a place that we should have never been in.
Well, Biden had an excellent press release when talking about sticking to his plan of coming out and in turn with what he said, former White House Communications Director Nicole Wallace, she was under the Bush administration, W, and current MSNBC anchor, said 95% of Americans will agree with what he was saying and 95% of the press will disagree. And that's, a very interesting thing because it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. So 2 years ago, then President Trump had announced his plan to pull out of Afghanistan and bring back the troops and get out of there. And the number one thought was, or rather, the parallel, because he had spoke on leaving the Kurds to pulling the troops out of that region, and then also had talked about pulling out of Afghanistan. In the 2 years since, nothing has really been made. We've had troops pulled out, but not en masse like we've just seen. And it's unfortunate, as you said, and tragic that you see people clinging to, a plane trying to leave. But the amount of damage that it would do to get re-involved on this would only further make the cycle. It would only keep the cycle going. You have to break the wheel at one point, and we have seen it forever. I mean, in the history of civilization, we have yet to see somebody successfully enter in Afghanistan and leave victorious. Still, we've yet to see that. And every time that the United States goes in somewhere for nation building and to, depose a leadership and insert their own, democratic leader, how does that turn out? We get, especially in the Middle East. I mean, we see it in the Middle East. We see it in South America. We see it in Southeast Asia, when that was the focus on every American's mind during the Korean and the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we do see it in South America, and we see it happen catastrophically in the Middle East and Northeast Africa. You have these. We take out a bad guy just to put in our good guy, who 10 years later turns out to be even worse of a bad guy than the first person. And everything could be avoided by just not being the world's policeman. I think that for the last 20 years, the United States has taken it upon themselves to make sure that we can, since Vietnam, we have made it, we need to push democracy. Since the Cold War, we've said we need to push democracy.
It's been since the end of World War II.
Yep.
We were the last superpower that was left, and so we took up a lot of responsibility, and then we just ran with it the entire time.
And it went unchecked. It went unchecked because anytime that we would create a mess, we would try to clean it up and walk away like nothing happened. Well, we made a mess, and we can't clean it up. So it's time that the United States takes responsibility and starts getting into negotiations, if anything, if the United States even needs to be involved. Get in negotiations with the Taliban to see what are they going for here, or gather intelligence and figure out what are they going for, because whatever it is, we should not have any militaristic part of it. We should, our focus needs to be, right here, because we have currently a pandemic that is ravaging our country, as with most of the world. We have so many different things around here that we can't figure out. So, and even if we were to get involved in another war, we are so far in debt, and on top of all the spending that has happened in the last year and a half, we can't afford a war. Around, I think, 20% of all the money in circulation right now has been printed since the beginning of the pandemic. So we can't print more money. In July, Consumer Price Index increased 6% in 1 month. So we can't keep going and funding these, business ventures in other countries to just further combat. Because, okay, here's the best case scenario if we do go in there. We go into Afghanistan, we eliminate the Taliban, we ravage the villages that are in Afghanistan, because we're not gonna really send troops, we're gonna send drones to bomb strongholds. We're gonna leave Afghanistan in shambles, and then 20 years from now, another terrorist organization is gonna spring up and come back at us for the thing, and in a similar manner that we saw on the tragic events of September 11th, 2001.
Right, and
we're gonna see the cycle keep going.
Yeah, it's, like I said, it's an unfortunate reality that we have to take into account. And again, as politicized as everything is right now, there's people on both sides of the aisle trying to point fingers at the other side, or at President Biden himself, for making this decision. And you pointed out, like, the people on the right are going to be like, we can't let the Taliban do what they're doing because they're a terrorist organization, or they harbor terrorist organizations, and they're going to mistreat their people and all that. And then people on the left saying we can't abandon the Afghan people who have been, like, trying to get out of this rule, but now are back to where they started before we even got there. That I'm sorry, I really am. But listen,
we can't go back in there.
It's not just that. I think there's a delusion, if I can call it that, that somehow, some way, we expect the rest of the world to be fixed up to a point where we can compare it to this country, where we are. Let's keep that in mind and put ourselves in that perspective that, listen, We are here in this country. We have these liberties. We have these resources. We have this money. We have these opportunities. We have this land and this mostly organized system of life and freedoms that we have, and saying, "Oh well, the rest of the world needs it." I'm sorry. I truly I am that doesn't exist in the rest of the world, but it does not exist in the rest of the world, and it's not going to in certain parts of the world. I it sounds callous, and it sounds like I don't care about the rest of the world. I do. But there's just a reality that we can't expect the things that exist in this country to exist everywhere else.
Yep.
And try to say they don't have the freedoms over there. We can't. We can't, because we can't pay for it. We can't force people to think differently. We can't force people to believe in a different religion. We just can't. And that was the mistake. Is that we expected to topple over a government, impose our will upon a people who have been there in that land longer than this country has existed. And we expect them to just say, "Oh no, you're right. We'll just revert to your style of life." And that's not the way it works.
No.
Democracy takes a really long time to figure out, and even longer for it to take hold.
And you need to want it.
And you need to want it. And look, I'm not saying people in those countries don't want freedoms and protections and rights. But we can't be in charge of that. And the rest of the world can't be in charge of everyone else. And obviously, when things cross the line, it has to be taken care of. But we can't say, "Oh, well, we're here, so let's try to impose our will." As as much as good or as much better as it would be if we were to impose our will on another country, that's just it can't be that way, because we are our own country, they are their own people, and we just can't. It's I don't have other words for it, because the crux of the whole situation is that they are not the United States of America. And we can't change that. But we want to include their quality of life. We can't be the ones responsible for that. We should be the ones responsible for that.
No, we shouldn't.
Can't.
We can't.
We can't. People who say we should,
they didn't learn anything from Vietnam.
There's a limit to how much people are willing to take your missile powered advice. All right.
Yeah.
It just can't work that way. If a group of people break off in that country, start a new country with democracy involved in everything, and they want to be their own people and their own identity, and they change things for the better, then this country, I'm sure, will be there to support them and to make things easier. I would say a perfect example of that is not fully done yet, if you can believe it, is Kosovo. Half the world recognizes its independence from Serbia, half the world doesn't. The U.S. does. But even that nation is still technically in limbo, even though its people have their own flag, national identity, national anthem, their own government, their own leadership. It exists. To me, that's a country. But politics in the world being what it is right now, they're not even fully recognized. So to expect one country by itself to streamline its military operations, to turn something into, turn one country into a completely different people, it's never going to work, and we can't expect this country to do that. We cannot. And to finish my final thoughts on the whole thing, like I said, bringing this back to those who are struggling with the idea of having fought in Afghanistan for as long as they have, who have seen their brothers and sisters and partners in arms die on the battlefield for this conflict. You completed your mission. You were following orders. This is not on you. This is on the leadership that failed you. You did your job. And you did it to the best that you could. You committed yourself to this country, and it failed you and your battle buddies and your fellow teammates. But you did your job. So don't blame yourself. Don't say, I want to go back and try to fix it. We can't. This isn't our problem anymore. We have to let it go. Because we can't afford your livelihoods any more than what we've already spent.
Yeah, it's, we've some gave a little and some gave it all, and we can't go back into it. It's
right.
A needless war fought for a needless 20 years, and no matter when we pulled out our troops, there was going to be something. So it's either we keep them there or we put them back in, and then we wait another 20 years, or we rip off the Band-Aid now. Stop the bleeding. Just take care of people.
Like I said, we had a chance to do this 6 different presidential terms. All had the chance to do what we needed to do.
And we got it on the 6th.
We got it on the 6th. And we gotta live with that.
Yep. Well, so I believe that is everything to cover on that topic. We will cover the rest of it as it develops on our next podcast that we have. And as always, we will continue to update all the situations that we talked about as it goes on.
Yeah, and we even got the stuff that we didn't really dig into some of the meat. We have midterm primaries coming up very soon, end of the year. Interested to see how that works. The Maryland gubernatorial race. We got to check in on that again because we're gonna have a new governor in the state of Maryland this next year. Got to check in on that, and just monitoring everything political as much as possible. It's important for all of us to be informed. Definitely say, let's make sure we do that to the best of our abilities. And don't take anybody at face value for what it's worth, even ourselves.
Yep, do your own research.
Do your own research. Do what's best for you to find out the information from trusted sources, from good information sources.
Multiple sources, definitely.
Yeah, always check your bases, and not just stuff that you want to hear. Just do the best
stuff you don't want to hear too.
Absolutely, and so keep all that in mind. And I would just like to plug in finally a few of our sources. We always like Real Clear Politics, 538, good website, and Election Betting Odds, one of our favorites. A lot of different good information there. And other than that, we have a sports channel as well. Yeah. It's usually a lot more fun than what this is, honestly. With PJ, the Italian in our group.
The resident Italian.
Yeah,
he's down tremendously.
He's for multiple reasons.
He beat the Delta, so he's going to be back and better than ever.
Yeah, so a man's won't die.
All right, well, that's going to be it for this edition of the We Talk Politics podcast. As always, I've been Corey.
And I've been Gerald.
And we will catch you next time.
See you later, everybody.